Okay, well, okay, so Pat and I have been going back and forth about where I left off at. And he says I left off at 18, verse 18 in chapter 12, but I don't, for some reason, seem to remember that. Does anyone else remember where we left off? No one else. Well, I guess I could start anywhere I want then. Well, the reason is I remember that we talked about let love be without hypocrisy. But I don't remember all the other stuff after verse 9. So what I'll do is kind of go over some of that. I guess it's, okay to hit that twice. He says, let love be without hypocrisy. What do you think that means? Let love be without hypocrisy.
I believe John Walker got the gold star for that last time.
You know what? I remember someone did answer that quite nicely. Where is John Walker? There he is.
There he is.
John, do you remember what you said?
No, I don't. Love without hypocrisy. No, I can't remember for the life of me. I'm sorry.
I think it was.
Wait a minute. I think it had to do with Romans 1:16, where Paul was talking about not being ashamed of the gospel.
Okay.
And
I think I remember you saying that your Christian life is lived in such a way that there's a consistency and an authenticity to it, that you're not just acting one way and living another. That's what I remember.
yeah,
That
no,
sounds
I think it
familiar.
was somebody else that answered that, because I don't remember that.
Yeah, there was two people that honed in on that.
Yeah, I don't think I was one of them.
Well,
I thought one of them was a female, one was a male.
was it Bunny?
Remember?
Was it Allison that jumped in on that? Well, okay. Let's say this, because that was a good answer a couple of weeks ago, and that is that the way we behave in our Christian life, it has an authenticity to it. We love without hypocrisy. I've known a lot of people who've gone to church and they put on a real good show, but their life is very different. And so what we're called to do is love. And that is a loyalty. We've talked about that before. I think the best word for love today is loyalty, that issue of loyalty. So, be loyal without hypocrisy. In other words, say what you mean and act like what you say, you believe. In other words, your life is your real sermon. How you live is really your sermon, what you preach. You can say what you want, but how you live is your real sermon. He says, let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, and cling to what is good. And I think that this is very appropriate for our culture today in what's going on today, to abhor evil and to cling to that which is good. We're all having, I think as Christians, we're all having to make choices about our viewing and, the social medias we're going to continue to go with, things like that, because of the godlessness and the hostility towards what is right by a lot of these companies. And so sooner or later, you're going to have to be inconvenienced and make a decision that you're not going to, it reminds me a lot of that passage in Revelation where God says to his people who are living in Babylon the Great, "Come out of her, my people, and do not share in her sins." So it seems to me that Babylon the Great may not be an actual city, but may be more a culture, a prevailing world culture. And God is asking believers and saints to extricate themselves from that culture, to pull out of it and not share in the sins of that culture. And so that's something, that we have to constantly, I think, be on guard about. And I think as Americans, we've been kind of lazy and naive in regards to how we've gone along with the culture in many ways. And I think we're coming to a place in history and a point in our country that you're like, okay, I have to start rethinking. Am I going to use social media that purposefully voids out the voice of other people who are speaking about what is true, or who voids out people who are Christians because of what they say? And more, I think we're going to be met with that kind of decision that we're going to have to make. Are we going to continue to participate in our culture? Or, as the Bible says, are we going to be aliens and strangers? And when you think about what that means to be an alien and a stranger, it means that you don't see things the way the people around you see them, and you don't behave in the manner of people around you either. And so when the Bible says that you are strangers and aliens, I think, to be honest, in many ways, Christians in America have not been strangers and aliens. But I think as our culture begins to disintegrate, and as godlessness begins to prevail, more and more, we are not only going to feel alienated, but we are going to pull away. We're going to purposefully pull away from the culture. And it's certainly going to cost us to do that. And I think we should realize that there's a price for that. When Jesus says, "Pick up your cross and follow me," or he told his disciples, if they've done this to me, how much more are they going to do to you? So then he says, "Be devoted to one another in brotherly love." So this is a natural progression, right? Live your life so that your love is not an act, that your loyalty towards God and towards the body of Christ is not an act. And in order to do that, in order to accomplish that, you're going to be faced with a decision where you must abhor what is evil and cling to what is good. And by doing that, you're going to have to be devoted to one another in brotherly love. All of these statements, they're not just separate statements that Paul is making. They're woven together, that one is linked to the other. To be devoted to one another and to give preference to one another in honor. So as we back off of the world, we begin to see the necessity and the importance for Christian community. And that Christian community only happens when we are devoted to one another in love. Now, look how that statement, be devoted to one another in love, it implies what verse 9 said, that let your love be without hypocrisy. If your love is hypocritical, you can't be devoted to one another in love. So this pulling away from the culture, pulling away from the world, which has always been the lot of Christians, then if you're pulling away from something, you have to pull to something. And what you're pulling to is the body of believers. And I think that this is going to become more and more important. The word I'm looking for is more than just necessary. It's, can't find the word. But you absolutely are going to have to begin to pull to the body of Christ. Now, this is very challenging because the world, in a lot of ways, has found a way to mute the church and to keep Christians from meeting. And so we're going to have to make decisions along the line of how far we're going to take that to not meet. And when is the right time to say, I'm sorry, I need to be with the community of believers, and I need to be in their presence, and we need to be praying for each other. So that is something that I think in these days of the whole COVID thing, your conscience will have to. I thought it was really funny. You know, I went to NorthCreek and I thought, well, they're meeting, and I got there and they're meeting outside that big, huge tent. And I was surprised that after the sermon, everyone took their mask off and they were hugging each other and talking to each other and, all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. That was their choice. But, they've been doing this for 6 or 7 months and they've had absolutely no outbreak whatsoever. So whatever, judge that on your own terms. But you have to decide what you feel is the wise thing to do. But my point is this, that whether you're doing it over Zoom or you're doing it in person, the necessity of the community of the body of believers is you just can't not have it. You have to have it. So I think we need to realize that the culture is going to more and more figure out ways to keep us apart and to figure out ways to silence our voice. And you're going to have to figure out when you've had enough of that, or how you're going to voice yourself. And so, I don't know. I just think that is really important, and having contact with each other is important, whether it's over Zoom or whether it's in church one-on-one. I think that's important. And then it says, not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, and practicing hospitality. So what is he talking about here? This is I think, a broad statement of saying, be sanctified, grow in your holiness, and grow in your sanctification. And again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. You cannot be sanctified outside the body of Christ. You can't. God created the church to be the body of Christ, and everyone is connected, and everyone has a particular gift, and that gift helps in the sanctification of other believers. And so the idea of oh, I don't go to church, I have my relationship with God and I just do it on my own. Well, that's just bull malarkey. It's not biblical, and it's just a way of saying you don't want to go to church. And then you got to answer the question, why don't you want to go to church? Why don't you want to be with other believers, hear the word, speak with other believers? And when I say go to church, I'm not saying you have to go there physically, but you know what I'm saying. Being under the teaching of pastors, being in communication with other believers. And I do think that we are hampered a great deal by not being physically with each other. I think we can all agree on that. So, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. So here now is how we are to respond to the culture outside of us. And that is, we are to bless those who persecute you. That's a hard thing to do. That's a very difficult thing to do. You have someone who is does not want your good, is an enemy for whatever reason, and yet the Bible says to treat them like a friend. And why is that? Because we were enemies of God and he treated us like a friend. So we're to mirror that same godly attitude towards everyone, whether it's a believer in whom we are devoted to one another in love, or it's an enemy who we bless those who persecute us. So it's important. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. In other words, be available to pull alongside people, whether they need you to just be there. I remember this one time, a friend of mine, he's actually a Bible teacher at Berean, very faithful, godly man, young man. And he got married, and they bought their first home in Concord and all that. And she got pregnant, and she was really excited. And I think about 5 months or so, 6 months into the pregnancy, she lost the baby. And I can remember going with Kent to Doug's house, and we literally just sat on the floor, all three of us, staring at each other for like a half an hour, because Doug didn't need us to say anything. He just needed us to be there. And so weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice. there's two different, I think, attitudes that when I think about this. Weep with those who weep. In other words, be empathetic. Have empathy. That means that you have to step outside of your own self-interest and your own schedule, and you have to look at the lives of other people and be willing to feel what they feel. And then to rejoice with those who rejoice, I think hits another issue. One, you have to have empathy to weep with those who weep. And two, you have to avoid jealousy to rejoice with those who rejoice. Empathy and jealousy are polar opposites of each other. Jealousy is self-centered and is more obsessed with how you feel, where empathy is other-centered and more obsessed with how they feel. So when he says rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, he's asking us in many ways to not be a jealous person, but to be an empathetic person. Does that track? Does anyone disagree with that? I'm trying to put meat on the bones of what he's saying, because I think to rejoice with people who are rejoicing means you have to be in either instance, okay, in either instance, whether you weep with someone who weeps or rejoice with someone who rejoices, and in both instances, you have to be interested in the life of others.
What that kind of means to me is you need to be there in the good times and in the bad times, that you don't only spend the time when they're, on the mountaintop and everything's going good and you're there as a friend, but the minute things start going south, you walk away. That to me is being hypocritical. You're not there. You're only there for when good happens. You're not there when the person actually needs support or somebody to be there.
So what you're saying is let your love be without hypocrisy.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good example of that. Being, and again, all of this requires a consistency of community. You can't look, if we're all living separate lives and living apart, how is this going to work? Unless there is some kind of community and consistency of community. I think it's important. So he says, be of the same mind towards one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. So be of the same mind. Do not be prideful, but associate. In other words, see yourself as every other believer. You're not better than them. You're not worse than them. So that you're of the same mind. If everyone is seeking to honor everyone else, then everyone is of the same mind. And it's not about, I can remember reading that book, Worldly Saints. I think it's by Riken. And one of the things he talks about the Puritans is that you would have people who were very rich, bankers, whatever they were, and they would be coming to church with people who were very poor, cobblers, street sweepers, and they would all pray for each other and speak to each other as though they were equals. There wasn't any, I'm better than you, I'm richer than you, I'm smarter than you. It was, you are a child of God and so am I. And so the street sweeper would be up there teaching the Bible to the bankers and the lawyers. And I think, this is important. So be of the same mind toward, do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. So then he goes on to 17. He says, never pay back evil for evil to anyone. So that's a pretty big word, never. So the thought here is there is not one instance where it is okay for you to take revenge on someone. When you're driving on the freeway and someone cuts you off, I know what you're tempted to do, but never pay back evil for evil. That's hard. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind in our political climate as well. Don't pay back evil for evil. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Do whatever you can to be at peace with everyone. That means you have to sacrifice your pride. And you may have to sacrifice other things to be at peace. As much as it depends on you. In other words, in the wording here, we realize that you can do everything and still not have peace with people, because it takes two, right? But what he's saying is do everything you can to be at peace with everyone. Never take your own revenge, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So more and more, as I see the injustices of our culture take place, more and more, I'm just getting in the habit of going, you know what? They have to answer to the Lord. I'm not going to sit here and get angry and bitter and, get an upset stomach over what these people are doing. I can't control what they're doing. They're going to have to answer to God. And so just leave room for God's judgment. That's in the big things and it's in the small things too. Just leave room for God's judgment. He'll take care of it. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him drink. For in so doing, you will, Ben was supposed to talk about this. You will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, the thing I've heard about the heaping coals on his head, there's two different versions of this that I've seen. One is that by doing that, heaping coals on their head, you're actually causing their judgment to be worse. Let me see if I can find this here. Oh no, it's not here. Hey, hold on, maybe it is. Nope, not there. I thought it was. The other one is that there was this, I guess, practice of when people were cold, that they had this device on their head and you could put coals on it and it would help keep them warm. And so that's what it's talking about. I don't know. You're gonna have to choose for yourself which one it is talking about. But heaping hot coals, it doesn't sound very good.
Hey, Tony,
Yeah.
I got a reference here in my Bible says refers to an ancient Egyptian custom on which a person who wanted to show public contrition carried a pan of burning coals on his head. The coals represented the burning pain of the shame and guilt. When believers lovingly help their enemies, it should bring shame to such people for their hate and animosity. So it sounds like it's
Yeah, that, you know,
it's shaming them.
that sounds pretty good. You do, because it's true, right? Of course, that's an Egyptian thing. So
Yeah.
I don't know if Paul would be referring to something that's Egyptian, but he might be if it carried over. Yeah, that just seems a little far, but it makes sense too, though, right? Because when someone's bad to you and then you're good to them, it brings shame on them. It does. It makes them feel ashamed of themselves for, how they behave. So that I would accept that. I think that's a pretty good rendition. I would just wonder if that carried over into the Egyptian or the Greek or Roman practice, because that's kind of seems kind of obscure that Paul would take something from the Egyptian history and assume that the Romans would know what he was talking about. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more.
I have to tell you that I got it out of the footnotes of my John MacArthur study Bible.
Well, Johnny's been known to be wrong. But only when he disagrees with me. Okay. He does his research, so that's just a hard leap for me to make, to go all the way back to Egypt. But maybe maybe he did some research and found that was a common saying. Maybe it was a common saying that held over. It's possible. So we do not know. We just don't know. So do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So you have two choices. You can either give into the culture or you can rise above the culture. And by doing so, even though it may not appear to be so, by doing the godly thing, you are winning. It may not look that way here on earth, but you are overcoming. So if you give in to the culture, you're being overcome. If you're not, you're overcoming. And now I will open it up for questions. Everyone's silent.
Oh, I have a question.
I have something, Tony. Along with, resisting the culture, would you say that we have to resist our flesh in these areas as well? Because because our flesh wants to repay for evil for good, and our flesh wants to go its selfish way. So we have to resist the flesh in all these admonitions as well.
Yeah, you have three enemies. You have the flesh, the world, and Satan. So those are the three enemies that we deal with. Yeah, I would say definitely Satan is behind much of the culture. And yeah, we do struggle with our flesh when we are wronged or something happens, then we want to have our vengeance, right? That's our flesh. So we have to overcome our flesh. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's all kind of in there, you can't get away from yourself.
Don't you think it's important for us to not think of everything as us overcoming by ourselves, but rather that we're overcoming in the power of the Holy Spirit? In other words, we need to link in to the Holy Spirit, submit to Him, yield to Him, so that He can actually empower us to overcome.
Well, yeah, I think, from what we've seen in chapters in chapter 6 and then in here in chapter 12, that there's no way. I mean, to me, it's just I guess assumed that there's just no way, if you're not walking in the Spirit, that you're going to have any victory. So it's assumed by previously what Paul stated, that you're walking. I mean, chapter 8 was all about that, walking in the Spirit, right? So he's moving this conversation forward with the assumption of, yes, I've already, made it clear, you've got to be walking in the power of the Spirit in order for these things. So now he's saying, because you notice he doesn't say, by the power of the Spirit, by the power of the Spirit. He says, do this and do this and do this, because the assumption there is, look, we've talked in chapter 8 about this necessity of walking in the power of the Spirit. And so I think the assumption would be, you're not going to be able to have any overcoming unless you're walking in the Spirit. So yeah.
Well,
For sure.
That's one of my concerns, is that when you hop around with verses, you don't get the context necessarily. Oh, well, obviously. And so when you read those verses, it does put people under the pile, or at least it makes them not realize that it's not their strength and courage. I mean, yeah, but it's rather.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that can happen. When Paul wrote it, he didn't have chapter breaks. He wrote one long letter.
Right.
And so one thought leads to another thought, leads to another thought. And so I think there's probably an assumption there that, I've already told you to walk in the Spirit, but you're right. If you just open up chapter 12 and you haven't read chapter 8, then you can walk away with, you just gotta, do your best on your own.
Right.
That's why it's so important to, when you do a Bible study, to do it expositionally, verse by verse by verse, so that you see how it's all linked together, the conversation.
True.
I think that's the power of expositional preaching. I think a lot of people get confused, and a lot of teachers are able to take verses out of context because they're just picking and choosing verses, and they're not bringing the context along with it. The Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons do that a lot. If you make them go back, they'll quote a verse, and then okay, well, hold on, let's go back. What's the context? Okay, so that's the context. Now, what does he say after this? Okay, so is that really what it means? No.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of those conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons where I'm like, nope, what is he saying here? You can't just take a verse out and pluck it out. You got to keep it in the context of what it says. Like in Peter, when it says, you must be washed in the water to be saved. And so the Mormons love to use that, and a lot of other people love to use that. But the very next verse says, and I am not talking about the washing of dirt from the skin, but of a clear conscience. So he goes on to define, he's not talking about water baptism. He's talking about the baptism of Christ.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, and so you go, okay, hold on. Let's go back. What is he talking about? Okay, what's the next verse? And they go, oh. I say, you can't just pick a verse out of the blue and try and make it, because it sounds like what you want it to say, but when taken in context, it doesn't. But you're
Well,
right.
that's what I so enjoy about this study.
Yeah, I just think it's the only way you can really study the Bible. You got to go verse by verse. And even then, when you're talking about several weeks or months of studying, you still have to remember, right, what was said in chapter 8, because this is all linked together about walking in the Spirit. So, but it's good you brought that up, because that causes us to remember the necessity of that. Well, you have to see what your gifts are. And if one of your gifts is teaching, then like the young man, Jameson, I call him JMO. We finished Romans and we just started the Gospel of John. And I think he may have a gift for teaching. So I don't just teach him, but I give him particular assignments to do, to study, to write outlines, to like I say, okay, you're going to teach me this section of the chapter now. And so I do think that's important. We should be able to recognize each other's gifts. And by the way, you guys should know what your spiritual gifts are, because you should be using them for the body of Christ. So, that's important. And I there are, tests or whatever you can take, but to me, if I spend enough time with someone, and I think it's true with anyone, you will recognize where their giftedness is. So if you guys know what your gifts are, I would challenge you, are you using them for the benefit of the body of Christ? Muy importante. Obviously, I have the gift of tongues.
Was that Greek you just spoke there?
Yeah, the what?
You got any more questions out there?
I have a question. What does the Bible say about when you're dealing with matters with believers, unbelievers? Is it okay to go through the court systems?
Well, the Bible says not to sue another believer.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes it's hard because, there are people who say they're believers and you're convinced they're not, but I think we have to just follow scripture on that, and leave it up to the Lord to straighten things out. Now it's different for unbelievers.
Mhm.
I think that's how you have to deal with unbelievers, is through the courts.
Mhm. Yeah, especially financial matters. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Tough when it comes to money. That we have a soft spot. We don't like being ripped off. John Walker has an early video appointment. Bye, John.
Okay, well, then I have another question.
Sure.
Well, actually, a statement and then a question. You talked about being sad with people, when they're sad, and then rejoicing with people when they're happy. And I have a girlfriend whose son died of cancer, and the same week their daughter got married. And it was with one of those, it was like that situation, because they were weeping because their son had died, and yet they were rejoicing at the new life of this couple together. I've never seen something like that happen in my life, where they were extremely one way and then extremely the other.
That's really hard, man. What an
Yeah.
awful thing to lose your son.
Yeah. And then turn around and rejoice with your daughter that, anyway. All right. Now back to this statement you made, which I kind of wonder how you would answer. You said that you cannot be sanctified outside the Church of Christ, and meaning outside the living out with other people, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Well, then the thought popped up into my head. There are some who are isolated, like, for example, if you're in prison or something where you're not able to function within the body of Christ. And so being sanctified takes on different meaning to me, because I do think that sanctification can happen outside people, because there's a God and me thing if I'm, say, in prison or something. Am I right about that, or am I?
Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying about that is a biblical principle, but obviously, now I know someone who's in jail, and they're surrounded by believers in jail. In fact, he goes to Bible study in church more than I do. He goes every day. So, in that case, in the prison case, yeah. Now, if you're talking about North Korea concentration camp or something, but even like, when you read Corrie Ten Boom, they had Bible studies in the concentration camp. So there's usually in that scenario. But if someone finds themselves completely isolated, God's grace is sufficient to work in the life of that person one-on-one with the Lord and sanctify him. What I'm saying here is, this is a principle that the Bible sets down, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any exceptions.
Okay.
Because God is gonna meet us where we're at. But the prevailing commandment is, do not forsake the fellow, and that's a commandment. Do not forsake the fellowshipping of the saints, right? So the prevailing commandment is, if you can,
Which most of us can. Which most all of us.
Right, which most of us can. And then if you can't, like, imagine Paul in jail, right?
Right.
So, but if you can't, God is greater. You know, these things are principles in which we're asked to live by, but there's always exceptions. And God is always able to deal with those exceptions, just like David taking the showbread, you know, for food when he was fleeing Saul. You know, there's always exceptions. It's about the heart, right? You know, you find someone, a Christian who's isolated, but in his heart, he's like, he wants to be with the body of believers. So, you know, God looks at the heart. Okay, Christian looks like he's going to say something.
Yeah, I do have a question about gifts, right? So I did the online test, and there's something supposedly it's a major in teaching, a minor in encouragement, but I don't know if it's true. So how do I find out if this is true, or how would I actually exercise that?
Well, one of them is, I think, like I said, the more you are integrated into the community of Christ, people will recognize that. The problem with the tests that you take, they're very subjective, and someone can be geared towards being a teacher. Doesn't mean you're a believer. It just means that you're geared towards being a teacher. So these tests are very limited. These tests can't tell whether or not you're a genuine believer or not, right? They can only indicate where you have abilities. So what I believe is that spiritual gifts, I think people are born, you know, with an ability to administrate, to teach, to whatever. We see that in the world, right? That they're not Christians. But I think what happens when you become a believer, the Holy Spirit infuses and supernaturally empowers the natural abilities you were born with. And I saw that in my life. I was very much, you know, into public speaking and that kind of thing when I was a teenager. And when I became a believer, that ability became completely redirected. And my desire to use that ability became completely redirected, and even, I would say, enhanced by the power of the Spirit. So to me, the limitations of those tests are, they really, what they're picking up on are your natural abilities. Whether or not you're a believer, none of those tests can tell you that. So you may be a teacher, but you may be an unsaved, unregenerate teacher. The issue is, are you a genuine believer? And if so, then that teaching is going, and here's what I'm going to say because of my own experience and what I've seen, not just with me, but with others. When someone's a genuine believer, they sooner or later, not only them, but the people around them recognize their gifts. And then they will be driven to use those gifts for the sanctification and edification of the body. That's how it was with me. I was driven towards that. So I think it's important for believers to find out what their gift is, and then I think it's important for them to use that gift.
Hey, Tony, can you recommend any tests or?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, John McNeff, who was the former pastor at NorthCreek Church, when he got his doctorate in ministry, part of it was doing this test, spiritual gift test. It's called Power Tools. And you could probably go on the NorthCreek website somewhere and find it. But it's not just a regular test, because he has you answer all these questions, but then there are like your testimony, and you have to go to other people and interview other people and what they see in your life. It's probably the most extensive or well-rounded of these tests that I've seen.
Does it cost anything?
I don't know. They might charge a couple of bucks for it. I used to give these to my students.
So extensive means it could take more than a few hours.
Well, yeah. I mean, because you're asking other people in your life, what do you see?
Yeah.
You know,
Do you
you want other believers to be able to verify if they're seeing the same giftedness that you're seeing.
Okay.
Tony, do you think that people also at least probably have an idea themselves what their gifts are?
You know what? I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so. You know, yeah. I don't know. I would think so. But the problem that I have, the thing that really bothers me, troubles me, is that I see 90% of the church doing nothing.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, well, where are your gifts? Don't you know? And part of this may be a lack of good preaching and teaching. They don't know. No one's ever told. No, you have a spiritual gift. Every believer has it. You need to find out what it is, and then you need to use it.
Right. It's kind of like I always ask people, how do you serve in your church? And sometimes people say, well, I don't really go to church. Well, it's like, first you got to find a church, then you got to figure out how to serve.
Well, it always troubles me when someone says, well, I really don't go to church. I don't need to go to church. When we do an awful lot about, like Cindy was just mentioning, walking in the Spirit, right? If the Holy Spirit is in you, there's going to be a certain dynamic in your life. Okay? The Holy Spirit's not just sitting there as some neutral little, gaseous form around you. The Holy Spirit is the Spirit of God, and it drives you. It drives you to do the things of God. So if you have the Spirit, and when I hear 90% of people are content to just do nothing, and then a lot of Christians say, "Oh, I don't need church." I'm saying, well, I don't know if you have the Spirit, because that's contrary to what the Spirit would have. As soon as I became a Christian, I knew, and I used to hate church. I grew up going to church, used to hate it. But the moment I became a Christian, I did not want to leave church. So when someone tells me they're a Christian and, oh, I don't need church, you might want to be worried. Because Christianity isn't about following a set of rules. It's a supernatural event that happens to you. It happens to you. You are born again. And when you're born, look, when you're born, you have a certain personality. And it's because you were born with that personality. And you're going to do what you're going to do because you're born with that personality. You're going to express yourself because you were born with that personality. In the same way, when you're born again, you have certain urges, beliefs, and drives in your life. And the Bible says what those are. It tells you what they are. So when someone says, oh, I don't need church, I'm like, well, you might want to revisit.
But I think you're right when you say that there's 90% of the people not doing anything. What's that may be not, I don't want to blame leaders in the church, but because like for me, you know, I'm always involved in worship bands, but in some ways that's a easy out because, you know, I can't go to a church without eventually the worship director finding me and recruiting me into the worship band, you know. So it's
Well,
that's kind of
but that's not an easy out. That's someone recognizing your giftedness, right?
right, exactly. But it's structured. It's really out there, and the church literally has somebody usually employed on staff to find people like me. Whereas like we got to like replicate that for all the other people. They got to be,
well,
you know.
that's why I do though. That's why I do blame it on the leaders to a certain extent, because as a shepherd, you're supposed, you know, look, I had 300 students and I was always looking at their lives to see where their giftedness was. And I was always trying to help them to grow in their giftedness. It's just a decision you make. Now, that doesn't, I'm not saying that believers aren't responsible for that, but if they've never been told, I'm going to tell you right now that most Christians have never heard from the pulpit, you have a spiritual gift and you're obligated under Christ to use it for the sanctification and edification of the body. They haven't heard that. Because preachers don't preach. You know why preachers don't preach that? Because they don't want to make anyone mad or turn anyone off. They don't want to put any kind of responsibility because they want people to keep coming. They want to keep entertaining them. So they have a nice big church and they're popular. You know, and that's what's going on. Pastors have to look at their congregations and be willing to say, you are believers, you have a spiritual gift. What is it? Let's help you find it out. And then let's direct you in where you can serve in the church.
Yeah, I think there is kind of a general sense of complacency with giftings, particularly, at least this is my experience. I'm wondering if anybody else feels the same way. Like I go to a big church and if I want to do ministry, yeah, I can be an usher or I can work at the greeting desk or something like that. But that's something that I sign up for. It's not necessarily what my gifting is. And or I don't really think I hear much about exploring your giftings. I mean, I know it's out there because I've heard a lot of about
well, I just wonder how many, you know, people are out there that have the gift of teaching and no one ever encourages them.
Yeah.
You know, or how many people have the gift of hospitality and no one, you know, if people don't even know what the gifts are, how are they going to recognize them? I've always loved to open my home to people. That's always something that, you know, Roxanne and I have done, people in need or whatever. We just have always opened our home. And, you know, that I think is the gift of hospitality. But, you know, you got to just see where your heart, you know, what does your heart direct you to do? I love to teach. I love to preach. Exhortation, I think, is something that I'm gifted in. Hospitality, counseling, you know, these are all kind of these pastoral gifts. And you just have to look at where are your gifts, and you'll kind of know because it'll just be natural. It'll be a natural inclination that you have.
And I think too that it just brings incredible enjoyment when you're able to live out your giftedness.
Oh,
But I have another question. We were talking about ideas. I'm asking for maybe some ideas of what kinds of cultural things to withdraw from. And then also, there are, I mean, in my mind, I think about the Amish and people like that who really have physically withdrawn. And so I'm asking you, I think that what you're talking about, or what the Bible's talking about, is a heart withdrawal. Is that what you're trying to explain to us?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think that we're kind of entering a period in American history where you really are seeing an evil force within the government and within the country that's rearing its head. And so, like Roxanne and I, we've gotten rid of our Amazon. We don't order on Amazon anymore. We're trying to cut loose a lot of these big companies that we know. I won't buy Nike shoes anymore because they're participating in human slavery, which is really funny because they're a big part of the BLM movement, and yet they're using human slavery in China, and so is Apple. And so, I mean, when something comes to my knowledge that they're doing something evil, then I'm like, well, my conscience, I'm not going to give you my business. I don't want to give you any of my money, even if that means I may not get a better product because of it. So that's something that your conscience is going to have to guide you on. But for me and Roxanne, as we are finding out a lot of these companies that are doing this kind of thing with China, who's not only using human slavery, but actively torturing Christians, more and more, I try not to buy anything if I can. It's very difficult, made in China, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, for me, it's not political. For me, that's a moral issue. You know, I'm not going to facilitate and give people money that are doing evil things. But then the other part of that is a heart retreat, you know, where when Roxanne and I watch TV, you know, we watch a lot of documentaries now and we watch the news. There's almost nothing that is suitable for a believer to be put in front of their eyes on TV. So you naturally just withdraw from the culture. And people are talking about, oh, you see this show or that show, and you're like, no, I don't, you know, I don't watch it, you know. So
you talked about social media, and I'm kind of wondering what you mean.
Well, I think more and more social media, Twitter and that kind of thing. I think you're going to see more and more. They're going to start not just silencing conservative political views, but I think you're going to start seeing them silence Christians.
Yeah.
And so do I want to take, you know, in Parler, you know, Parler tried to say, well, we'll just go off on our own. But unfortunately, they were using Amazon servers. And so we see just how hostile these people are that are now controlling our country. And I think they will continue to gain influence and power because they're willing to lie, cheat, steal, murder, and do whatever they have to do to get it. And I'm done being angry about it or bitter about it. they're going to have to stand before the Lord.
Hmm.
My job is to not be tainted by their vile behavior and thoughts. And my job is to do the work of the kingdom while I'm here. And I think more and more Christians are going to have to make a decision that they're here to do the work of the Savior, not to participate in the culture. And so that's going to be uncomfortable and not so much fun, but it is what it is.
I remember how respected people of God used to be in our culture. And then it was not really necessary to pull away from television because television was very moral and, but now it's like you say, it's very hard to watch anything that.
It's interesting because, like my wife points out, every year, all of the networks have a certain issue that they push. One year it was the gay thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was gay children. Then it's transgender. So you'll see, and it's really interesting that you'll see things like, Law and Order and CSI and NCSI and all these shows will all have the same theme. And it's really interesting. We've been noticing that for the last 6 or 7 years, where it's almost like they all get their marching orders on, okay, we really want you to push homosexual families. We really want you to push abortion. We really want you to push transgender children. And all of them are doing, all of them have a gay character, a transgender character, whatever in it. And so it's really interesting to see how they're pushing, certain things, we just like, well, we're not watching that show anymore. Well, we're not watching that show anymore. And pretty soon there's nothing to watch, but documentaries, and you can go watch some of the old, I Love Lucy and shows like that. So, it is nice. We got a Roku, and that enables us to go and find a lot of decent stuff,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just think it's ironic how society thinks everybody should be loving and accepting, but yet Christians are becoming outcast.
That's because Christians are haters.
No. Love, God says love the person, not the sin.
Yeah, but see, what they want you to do is not just tolerate them. They want you to agree with them and give up your own convictions. That's what
but then we're not standing with God's word, so we can't do that.
There you go.
But they're not accepting that.
Was it Peter Jones, or was it no, it wasn't Peter Jones. It was what's his name? Oh, darn it. It'll come to me. He did a Christian guy. He did a lecture at Berkeley. It's called The Intolerance of Tolerance. And his point was, number one, the word tolerance isn't a positive word. For instance, if you were to tell me, hey, I went out with Pat to dinner yesterday. Oh, how was the conversation? It was tolerable. Oh, okay. Well, was the food good? I tolerated it. Tolerance is not a positive thing, in the sense that tolerance means that you don't agree with something, but you're willing to coexist. But now what tolerance means is that you have to give up your own convictions and bow the knee to their agenda. And so they say tolerance, but they have no tolerance for anyone who disagrees with them. So that's not tolerance at all. It's very hypocritical. It's very oppressive. It's very wicked. But this is where we're headed right now. They don't want you to simply say it's okay for you to exist, even though I disagree with you. They want you to say, I give up my God, I give up my morals, and I bow the knee to your homosexuality or your transgenderedness or your communist, atheistic, whatever. That's what they want. And that's, now they're using the word unity. Oh, we all need to be united. Well, what they mean by unity is shut up and do as we say, and then we can all get along. So that's kind of where we're headed right now, but it is what it is.
Well, it's scary because a lot of people aren't remembering history or being educated on history as much.
Well,
and you don't want history to repeat.
Well, they purposefully rewrote history in order for it to be repeated. They took American history and they perverted it, they twisted it, they ostracized it, they villainized it. And so now when you talk to a young person, they have no idea what democracy means. They have no idea what the Constitution says or the Bill of Rights. They have no idea. None. And they think socialism is wonderful and communism is wonderful. And it's because the universities have been pumping out this garbage since the 1970s. So it's no wonder, and there are consequences to this type of indoctrination, and we are gonna see the consequences of that in our country. We will. But it should be, it shouldn't be a shock to any of us. I mean, we've seen this coming for a long time.
I used to live with my family in a post-communist country for about 10 years. And I can't even believe anybody would want that. And I can't even believe anybody knows the reality of what they're applauding that we're heading towards.
Well, the problem is that the people who lived in a communist country see it coming and they're like, I can't believe this is happening in America. This is what,
This is why we left there.
Yeah. But, honestly, what's being taught in the schools is so America is evil. That's what they're teaching. America. San Francisco doesn't even like Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln? How is he a bad person? And I'm going to tell you why he's a bad person. I'm going to tell you why. They're not going to say he was a slave owner or he was pro-slavery, because he wasn't. Abraham Lincoln was two things that they find not acceptable. One, he was the first Republican president. And two, he was a believer. I'm telling you right now that there is a great oppressive dictatorship that's arising in our country. and their anger is mainly at, and I'm going to tell you that their anger is at the Republican Party mainly for their pro-life stance. What they're really mad at is they hate God. The Democratic Liberal Party, they hate God. They hate God, and they show it because the very most important thing to them is killing babies. They're wicked. They're evil. You know, and it's, oh, we don't want to call people evil because, no, it's evil. You want to kill a baby, you're an evil person. I'm sorry. And that's part of the problem in our country is we've gotten afraid to call evil evil. You want to kill a baby, you think it's okay to kill a baby, you're evil in your heart. Period. And this is where we're at now. You know, we have evil people that are running our country. They hate God, and they hate anyone that's born in the image of God.
Hey, Tony, I want to tell you really quick. I can't remember where I read this from, but when San Francisco decided they wanted to rename Abraham Lincoln High School, I think, they said it was because they felt he didn't do enough for Black people. And I thought, I guess taking a bullet to the head wasn't enough.
Not enough. Yeah, I guess that's not enough. No, I'm going to tell you right now, he mentioned God way too many times in his speeches. And he represents the Republican Party. He does.
Well,
so what you're seeing is, you know, there's, you know, these people are never honest about what their true intentions are. They never have been. And I hate to break it up into political parties because it's really not about political parties. It's about evil versus good. We have a section of our country that believes that to offer babies on the altar of Molech is a good thing. And we know how God feels about that. We know how God feels about that.
Don't you think it's fair to say, though, that the Republicans, they are guilty of standing by and doing nothing about that?
Sure.
That kind of makes
They're
them
cowards.
sad.
A lot of them are cowards. Look, you know, you can't just point at one political party, right? You have one political party that is outwardly, aggressively pursuing wicked and evil things. And you have another political party that is so interested in keeping their power and money that they're willing to let them do it. They're cowards. They're cowards. They don't want to make a stand. You know, it's one of the things that I like about Donald Trump, President Trump, was that, you know, like his personality or not, he stood for what he believed and he never apologized for it. He was the first president to walk in the walk for life. First president to keep his word and bring the embassy to Jerusalem. First president to go into the prison system and try to protect those who were poor or being racially discriminated against and protect them. I mean, you know, but you see what happens when you do good. Now, what his biggest problem is that he was a blowhard and he was arrogant, you know, and that's sad. But, you know, at some point, I care more about what a person does than what he says. And I see what he did. He did a lot of good. And I guarantee you, let me tell you this, if he would have been humble and kind and whatever, he still would have been hated. They still will have, he just made it easier for him. He just made it easier for him because he's a schmuck. But, you know, his heart was in the right place. And you know what? As far as God is concerned, it's about the heart. You know, it's about the heart. What do you do? I don't care what you say. What do you do? So yeah, we're in a very interesting time in our country, and we need to be praying. We need to be praying for President Joe Biden. Whether you believe he was there illegally or not, I tend to think he is, but he's our president, and God allowed him to be there. So we need to be praying for him, that he makes good and godly decisions. We need to be praying for our leaders.
Definitely agree with that. You know, Trump also, he was he hosted the meeting for the United Nations on religious freedom.
Yeah, he did.
And he's the first president that did that. So he did stand for a lot of biblical values.
He did a lot of firsts. He really did. And it's sad to see. But you know what? If they treat Donald Trump this way, who did so many genuinely good things, but was a schmuck, what do you think they're going to do to you guys?
Exactly. I feel like we're next to be ostracized.
Yeah, your time is coming, you guys. Your time is coming.
Yeah.
I know it's gonna happen.
It's just a matter of time before your job is gonna be on the line, your property is gonna be on the line, look, I'm gonna tell you, don't even worry about, oh, how am I gonna retire? Or, how much property do I have? Or how much money? Don't even worry about that crap, because it's going away, people. You can sit there, and I'm not saying don't be unwise. Sure, prepare for your old age or whatever. But I'm telling you, most likely it's going away. It's going away. I own 4 houses right now. I really think I'm looking at, they're going to take them. In the next 5 to 6 years, they're going to find a way to take everything I own. And you know what? Whatever. Go for it. Because this isn't my home. This isn't my home. So I don't expect that, I've been working hard to try to leave my son an inheritance, because the Bible says that. The Bible says you should try to leave your children an inheritance. I'm leaving him a spiritual inheritance, but I want to leave him a monetary inheritance too. That might not happen, but it won't be because of me. So it's okay. 10 years from now, I might be sitting in a jail cell. Okay. What difference does it make? I got another 30 years or so on this earth, and I'm done anyway. Why do we worry so much about what we have here and now when we're going to spend the rest of eternity in either heaven or hell? You think a million years from now, you're going to look back and be worried about these 80 years you spent on earth?
No.
No, you're not. So start thinking about eternity and stop worrying about the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
Be content and thankful for everything that you have. The most Joyful people are the people who learn to be thankful for what they have instead of worrying and whining about what they don't have. Don't be that person. Don't worry about what you don't have. Don't whine about what you don't have. Be thankful for what you do have, and you'll live a life of joy.
Can you remind us of what you said about hoping that it would be a great privilege to be martyred? And yeah, could you just kind of go over that again?
Well,
I mean, you said you would want that.
To me, well, because I think the greatest honor that a believer can have would be to die for their Savior. I don't know if I would ever deserve that honor. I think that's an honor. It's not, it's reserved for people who are faithful and true
Mhm.
to Christ.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like Paul, Peter, all the disciples.
Because there is grace that is involved in God's grace coming on you during that time to actually die for Christ. It's an honor. I don't think I deserve that honor.
You also said something that I would like you to repeat about what was it? Now I can't remember. Okay, go on to something else and I'll try to remember. I'll write it down when I remember it.
Was it about planting that seed of faith? Each of you send me $1,000 and you'll plant that seed of faith. Was it that one? Was that the one?
No, I don't remember you saying that.
I'll split it with
get
you.
me to say that every week. Tony said he wants me to bring that up in announcement time at the beginning of the year. That's something about me going from house to house with a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket, and I put it by your door. I knock on the door, step 6 feet away because that's COVID responsible. You open the door, drop some money in. Close the door.
I like that idea.
Then I go to the next house. And then we go to Disneyland.
It's funny because my wife and I watch these. There's certain shows I like. I love shows about serial killers, not because they're killing people, but how they catch them. I'm always fascinated on how they catch them, and also about cults. How they develop and that kind of thing. And I always tell my wife, I said, it'd be very easy to start a cult. You just tell people what they want to hear. You just appeal to their baser instincts.
L. Ron Hubbard said, want to get rich, start a religion. And 1 year later, Scientology was born.
Yeah. He knew he was a big fake.
Yeah, but they're also blackmailing people. I mean, they have it.
Scientology is a scary place. Yeah.
Stacey, don't criticize their marketing techniques. No, come on,
but they act like they're helping you psychologically, and then they have all this dirt on you.
Yeah. See, that's smart.
It sounds like government.
The Catholic Church could have been doing that for years. They had confession, but they never monetized it like they could have.
Okay, I remember it now.
She remembers. Okay.
You were talking about when the Antichrist comes, or when the people who precede that person come, that we Christians will be able to recognize them right away without the Christians aren't going to be fooled. And Yeah, could you just kind of go into that a little bit more? I was fascinated by that.
Well, first of all, you got to have the secret decoder ring.
Ah,
Important. Now, you can purchase this from Pat Aria Ministries. Yeah, and the reason is because you're going to have the Holy Spirit. You know, this is like, I was talking to my customer yesterday, and her and her husband, very nice people, and she was saying, I go to this church, and she goes, I don't understand. They're all Christians, but they're all Democrats and for abortion. She goes, I don't understand. And I said, well, it's because one of two things. Either they've never been taught the Bible, or they don't have the Holy Spirit. And again, you know, having the Holy Spirit gives you an ability to discern between good and evil. So someone who says they're a Christian and they're okay with killing babies, I really have my doubts at that point. I really, really, really do. I believe that the Holy Spirit, and I told you this story of my mom wanting to go to this pastor in San Francisco, and you know, because she had cancer and he was healing people, and my dad took her, and you know, my dad knew in 5 minutes that the guy was demonic, and it was Jim Jones. And so, you know, the Holy Spirit is going to tell you, especially in the end times, you know, where I believe Christians will know. Look, we are already seeing, as John said, the spirit of Antichrist. We're already recognizing what's going on. How many so-called Christians, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Methodist, have gone over to, oh, it's okay to have homosexual pastors. It's okay to, you know, how many Christians, so-called, in America, more, probably like 60 or 70% or more, have gone over to the spirit of Antichrist already, which means what? They were never believers to begin with. So, you know, when you start looking and seeing this, you know, they say, oh, there's, you know, 100 million Christians in America. No, there might only be 5 to 10 million Christians in America. And we're going to find out, because as this stuff is revealed, they don't get sucked into it. They look and go, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. That's of the spirit of Antichrist. That's the first wave. The second wave is, are you willing to give up your life and your things? That'll be the second. There's like 2 filtration systems. The first one is culture, that filters out all the fake Christians. Then the next one is materialism. Are you willing to give up what you have, even your life? And that filters out the rest. There's the you know, Satan loves to use these 3 things. You've heard of these 3 things, and they've been around for a long time. Materialism, pragmatism, and utilitarianism. Materialism is quite clear. We all know what that is. Pragmatism is, you know, is basically, you know, do what's practical, what serves the purpose of the more, you know, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. And utilitarianism is it doesn't matter. what you do as long as you get the desired effect. What's the term I'm thinking from that we always use? It's
Machiavellianism?
no, not Machiavellianism. It's a saying that
And justify the means.
thank you, Robert. The ends justify the means. Now, you look at those three. Let me take you 2,000 years ago to the wilderness. We look and we see a man all alone walking in the wilderness. He hasn't eaten or drunk water in 40 days. Now, what does it say in Matthew 4? The Spirit drove him into the wilderness. Now, Satan shows up. His first thing he says, if you're the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. Materialism. Or as Eve or First John, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. She saw the fruit was good to eat. She saw that it was pleasing to the eye, and she saw that it was good to make one wise. 1 John 2:15, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. Genesis 3. And now those are thrust into the wilderness. And what does Jesus say? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. In other words, it is the Spirit of God who drove me to the wilderness. It is the Spirit of God who drove me to the fast. It must be the Spirit of God who tells me when the fast is ended. And thus the angels came and ministered to him. Materialism. Then Satan says, hey, why don't you just go up to the, why are you doing all this? Just go up to the temple, because the Jewish tradition was that the Messiah would be seen at the pinnacle of the temple coming down. So Satan said, go to the temple and jump off, because the Bible says that he will not allow your foot to dash upon a stone. The angels will come and bear you up. Pragmatism. Hey, just do this. It's easy. That's a practical thing to do. Jump off, fulfill the Jewish prophecy and expectation. Angels come, boom. And what does he say? Do not put your God to a foolish test. What might be practical for you or make sense to you does not make sense to God, because he wants us to follow his plan, not what's practical. When Roxanne and I got married, all of my Christian friends and her family told me that we needed to use birth control because we were too poor to have kids. I didn't believe in birth control. God said to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. In the Hebrew, it was a command. It's a command. He never took that command back. So I believe that a man is to be married and to have children. That's what God's commanded him to do. Be fruitful and multiply. That was my personal conviction. So I didn't believe in birth control. So what happens? Roxanne gets pregnant on the honeymoon. Everyone's laughing. See, now how are you going to support your family? I said, I'll do whatever. If I have to work 3 jobs, I'll work 3 jobs to support my family. Well, Roxanne goes to her first sonogram and finds out she has kidney disease, polycystic kidney disease. The doctor looked at her and said, you know, if you would not have gotten pregnant now, you would never have kids. So tell me pragmatism is the way to go. And I'll tell you a story different. So materialism, then Satan takes Jesus and says, look at all these kingdoms. And if you bow down and worship me, I'll give them all to you. You don't have to die. The ends justify the means. Utilitarianism. And Jesus says, no, you'll worship the Lord your God only. Materialism, pragmatism, utilitarianism. Jesus defeated all of them. Lust of the flesh, materialism. Lust of the eyes, pragmatism. Pride of life, utilitarianism. Defeated in the wilderness. There you go. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that.
You know, I think we talked about this once before a while ago because it sounds very familiar. And I seem to remember we talked about how what Satan is tempting, well, he's tempting God, and that's an impossible thing to do because God's not going to sin, and yet he does it anyway. Because
because you have to understand that Satan is blinded by his own arrogance. I mean,
he really thinks that he can make God sin.
Yeah, if Satan was willing to accept the truth of who God was, why would he ever even indulge himself in this? But sin blinds you. It blinds you. It makes you act in an insane manner against all, reality. But that's why when I was getting ordained, I got in a heated argument with one of the pastors there on the council. There's like 20 pastors. And he said, when Jesus was tempted, did he actually feel the desire to do what Satan? And I said, no, Jesus didn't have the sin nature. Jesus was tempted only in the fact that he was hungry and Satan gave him another alternative. Jesus never once desired or struggled with, oh, should I or should I not do it? Now, he struggled with hunger. He was hungry, but he never once even considered going against God. Remember, James says God cannot sin, nor does he. So, and this guy really, really did not, he was a Christian counselor. And he didn't agree. Oh, no, that's heresy. You can't say that. Of course, he struggled with. No, he didn't. He didn't have sin nature. If Jesus could be tempted to sin back then, he could be tempted to sin now. And it also means that it's possible for Jesus to sin, which means it's possible for God to sin, which means that our salvation hangs in the balance. It theologically makes no sense whatsoever when you consider the identity of Jesus. We went on for about 20 minutes back and forth. And finally, the head chairman of the council said, okay, we're done with that discussion. Tony's right. Charles, you're wrong.
Tony, do you believe, does Satan know that his days are numbered?
Yes.
He does know that.
Yeah, I think he does.
Okay. I thought maybe he was blinded to even that.
Well, I think he knows his days are numbered, but he's still self-deluding himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what goes on in his mind.
Yeah.
Put the hat on.
Did Adam and Eve have a sin nature? Because, you know, they were able to sin, even though it seems to me like they did not have a sin nature. That just happened after they
Yeah,
sinned.
they were not born with a sin nature, but they weren't divine.
Uh-huh. So it really has nothing to do with the sin nature.
No.
It really has more to do with he was divine.
Yes. In other words, what God is showing us through all of this is there is no one who is like God.
Uh-huh.
The angels fell, humans fell, the world fell. Why? Because we're not God.
Right.
And that's the point. The point is there is only one God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we say that, we're not just talking about his authority or his power, we're talking about his character. You see, the reason why God can't sin is that sin is basically anything that is contrary to his character. God cannot do anything that is contrary to his character. That's what sin is. Sin is anything that is contrary to the character of God. So how could God sin? It's impossible. Say, well, is there anything God can't do? Sure, he can't sin. He can't. And some philosopher would say, oh, well, then he's limited. No, because sin is not a plus. Okay, sin is a defect. It's a minus. So what you're saying is God is without defect because he's without sin. That doesn't limit God. That makes God unlimited. So we've got to start thinking biblically about what sin is, what it is and what it is not. Because this whole freedom in our culture, oh, you got to be free to be homosexual, free to be transgender, free to be this, free to be that. That's not freedom. That's slavery. It's defect. You're saying, oh, I want to be defective. Okay? That's not freedom.
Sorry, I interrupted. We are at the bottom of the hour. Just wanted to pray us out.
I will pray us out.
Thank you so much.
Father, thank you for this time, Lord. We thank you for the study, the questions, and the conversation back and forth. It's always delightful. We appreciate that. So, Lord, we would just ask you to lead us. And we do pray for our leaders in government and our leaders in churches to do the right thing. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.